On a cold night in 1929, a neighbor heard strange noises coming from a small laundry shop in New York City, and she called the police. When officers arrived, they found the door locked from the inside. The windows were sealed shut, but inside was a dead man, shot at close range. No weapon, no suspect, no way in or out. What happened in that tiny room has puzzled detectives for many years. This is one of the strangest real-life murder mysteries in American history. It was March 9th, 1929, a Saturday night in Harlem, New York City. People were finishing dinner. Some were getting ready for bed. The streets were quiet. Inside a small laundry shop on East 132nd Street in New York City, a man named Isidore Fink was still working. He was 30 years old, a Polish immigrant, and lived in a tiny room at the back of the shop. He had come to America several years earlier, leaving behind a hard life in Europe. Back in Poland, his family had struggled. He wanted a better future, not just for himself, but for them too. He had no close relatives in New York. He didn't talk much, he didn't go out. All he did was run his laundry and mind his business. Fink was known around the neighborhood as a quiet, honest, serious man, and always cautious. His place had just 2 rooms. His laundry shop in the front and a living space in the back, where he stayed. The only entrance was a single wooden door facing the street. It had 2 strong bolts on the inside, one at the top, one at the bottom. On either side of the door were 2 small windows, but they were covered with metal bars and nailed shut from the inside. No one could open them or squeeze through. Above the door was a small transom window, just big enough for a child to crawl through, but not for an adult. He always kept the doors locked, even while he was inside working. He was afraid of getting robbed, and back then, thefts in the area were common. To be safe, he usually bolted the front door shut from the inside and only opened it for people he knew. That habit would later make the crime even more confusing. That night, he had no idea something was about to happen that would remain a mystery for many years. At around 10:15 p.m., a neighbor named Mrs. Lockhart, who lived in the same building, heard strange noises coming from Fink's shop. She heard what sounded like a fight, then a man's groans of pain. Afraid something terrible was happening, she rushed to the shop door. She tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. She quickly called the police. Officer named Arthur Hose arrived within minutes. He also found the door locked. He checked the windows, all were shut and secured with iron bars. There was no way inside, no sign of anyone leaving. To avoid breaking the door, Officer Hose called over a young neighborhood boy. He lifted the boy up to the transom window above the door. The boy squeezed through the opening and unlocked the door from inside. When the officers entered, they saw something horrifying. Isidore Fink was lying face down on the floor. He had been shot 3 times, once in the chest and twice in his left wrist. There was blood everywhere. He was already dead. Inside the shop were shelves, baskets, a hot iron, and a gas stove that was still burning. Soon detectives arrived and began a thorough examination of the crime scene. They quickly saw that there was no gun near the body, and the way the bullets hit made it clear that was murder, not suicide. They looked at the cash box. It was still locked and full of money. Fink's wallet was also untouched in his pocket. That meant this wasn't a robbery. Detectives also searched Fink's small back room, checking under the bed, inside drawers, and along walls and ceiling, and found no sign that anyone had hidden there after the murder. Next, they checked the heavy bolts on the door, both firmly set from the inside, and inspected the barred, nailed-shut windows. Every barrier stood exactly as it had been. No signs of anyone forcing their way in or out. Fingerprint powder revealed no usable prints, and the dusty floor showed no footprints. All the evidence led back to one impossible fact. A man had been killed in a room completely locked from the inside, with no weapon and no clear reason why. The detectives stood in silence, facing a crime scene that defied explanation. Investigators next turned to people who knew Fink best. They spoke with Mrs. Lockhart, other tenants in the building, and regular customers who dropped off laundry. They asked each if they had seen anyone enter or leave the shop that night, or noticed any arguments or threats in the days before. They even interviewed the delivery man who brought soap and starch that afternoon. In every case, the answer was the same. Fink lived alone, bolted his door, and had no visitors. Throughout their investigation, detectives tested every plausible explanation for how the killer could have acted and vanished. First, the team examined the transom window above the door as a possible firing point. They measured its mere 6-inch height against the powder burns on Fink's clothing and concluded it was far too small to allow anyone to position a firearm close enough for a point-blank shot. Finally, detectives explored the idea of a mechanical trick, using a long rod or wire to bolt the door from the outside after the shooting. They brought in sample rods and tried to fasten both the high and low bolts without entering the room. But the heavy mechanism and precise alignment proved impossible to manipulate silently. No such tool was ever recovered at the scene. And why would the murderer bolt the door from the inside instead of simply fleeing the scene? After weeks of exhaustive investigation, the police concluded that Isidore Fink's murder was an impossible crime. Every theory had been tested and ruled out. No weapon, no forced entry, no hidden door, no witness. With no suspect, no motive, and no clear way the killer could have entered or escaped. They finally closed the file as an unsolved case, admitting they could not explain how, or by whom, Fink had been killed. Over the years, writers and investigators have offered several ideas about how the killer might have slipped away from that locked shop. Some people believed the killer might have escaped through the transom window above the door, but it was far too small for an adult to crawl through unless they were unusually small and slim. Some believed there might have been a hidden exit, like a trapdoor beneath the floorboards, or a removable wall panel leading to the building next door, or to a shared basement. But police examined every inch of the floor, walls, and ceiling, tapping for hollows or loose sections, and found nothing unusual. Some believe that Isidore Fink may have known his killer. He might have opened the door for someone he trusted, who then suddenly shot him 3 times and fled the scene before Fink could react. In a final moment of panic, Fink, though seriously wounded, might have bolted the door himself out of fear that the attacker could return. It sounds unlikely, but then again, so does being murdered inside a room sealed from the inside with no clear way in or out. At the time, many believed it was impossible for someone shot in the chest to move far, let alone secure a door. However, modern medicine has shown that, depending on where a bullet hits, victims can still function briefly. In a retrospective piece, Emily Narciso, a physician assistant in emergency medicine, noted, "You could run 25 feet if shot in the chest, depending on where the bullet hit. I've seen people drive themselves to the emergency department after being shot and then simply run through the front door." If Fink had moved to bolt the door after being shot, you would expect to see bloodstains near the door. But police found none. Still, it's possible that his wounds didn't cause heavy external bleeding immediately. So any movement, like securing the door, might not have left visible traces on the floor. This theory hasn't been proven, but it offers one of the few physically possible explanations for how the door could have ended up locked from the inside. And honestly, I believe this might have been what actually happened. And that known person Fink opened the door for could have been Mrs. Lockhart too. Forensics were limited at the time. The police relied heavily on her statement to estimate the time of death. But she was never treated as a suspect. She may have committed the murder with the help of someone else. then created an alibi by calling the police and claiming she heard groans from next door. And while this scenario is purely speculative and has no evidence to support it, it remains one of several possible explanations people have suggested over the years. And with that, Fink's case remains unsolved to this day, leaving anyone who reads or hears about it asking the same question: how did Isidore Fink die? Inside a locked room? If you found this case as intriguing as we did, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life mysteries, and don't forget to share your own theory about what might have happened in the comments below. Thanks for watching.